Welcome to the Industry Angel Podcast. We hear from the best business minds across the globe, entrepreneurs, social influencers, marketing mavens, and sales rock stars. We've got them all. Here comes your weekly dose of inspiration with your host, Ian Farah.
Hello, welcome back. First live of 2021. And what happened? We went straight into lockdown, which was pretty crazy, wasn't it? But I hope you managed to have a good Christmas and New Year with your friends and family. I know we had to kind of cut it short a little bit with about who we could see and stuff, but I'm sure we had a good time. Thanks so much for all your messages as well over the Christmas period. Really great to receive them over social. Love to hear from you. So if you're watching, do me a favor, let me know you're here because we are live over Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, I hope. And hopefully you can hear us live. This is a sneaky one because we didn't really promote it. We just threw it out there quite quickly because it's Micro Biz Matters Day. So our friend Tony Robinson we've had on the show, Tony and his team put a Micro Biz Matters Day on every year to celebrate micro businesses. And it's today. It's, what is it, the 7th? No, the 8th. It's the 8th of January. So you can check that out on microbizmatters.co.uk. I've recorded an interview with Tony, and it's, I think it's on about 2 o'clock. So you'll be able to see my ugly mug twice today, if that's of interest. But we'll have a good conversation, actually. It's really good. Tony is always great for content. So yeah, it's celebrating Micro Biz Matters Day. So we threw this out there. And what we're going to do is have a conversation with friend of the show, Luke, because Luke's been busy during this last year, squirreling away. And he's got a new book out. And he reached out and said, I've got a book. And I think it could be of interest to your audience. I said, yes, let's get you on Friday. Let's throw a sneaky live in and we'll do it. So he's waiting in the wings, ready to tell us all about that. So if you're here, let me know. As you know, I can throw your comments up on the screen and you can ask Luke anything you'd like. And well, yeah, I always say that, don't anything, maybe, not anything, but you never know. He's a pretty open chap. Ask him anything you like and we'll throw it up on the screen for you. So then let me check my bio and get a little bit of knowledge on Luke, because he's been managing or he's participated in remote-only knowledge work teams for almost a decade. Most recently, he led a program of approximately 30 distributed across 13 time zones and 8 different locations. Luke, I'm just going to have to bring you in. Welcome to the Industry Angel, Luke Szyrmer.
Hey, how are you?
You've been busy, man. 30 people, 13 time zones, 8 different locations.
Yeah. It was quite a intense experience, to say the least.
Intense. Wow.
Yeah.
So what you how did you do it? You must have had like lots of tech. What were you using, like Slack and all these bits of trendy stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been at it in one form or another for a while. And yeah, I mean, in this particular case, it was a software team. So I think that, it made it easier that people were used to picking up tech and just using it really quickly. And although even there, anytime there's something new, people do get sensitive about it sometimes initially, but once you realize what it can do, especially for the group, then that's great, and then it works. I mean, I think the starting point for the book actually was that, in fact, a lot of the initial conversation around lockdown was just, or COVID really was, just this list of 38 different tools you can use and that kind of thing, which is completely understandable because that was just so new for everyone. But I mean, having been around and having been doing this for a while, at that time I was like, well, there's this other whole topic of like, how do you actually get things done when everyone's remote? And it's like it's not about the options on Zoom or that kind of thing. It's about how people work together. And how you divide up the work, how you collaborate together, and all of that part of it. And yeah, so that's kind of how I talked myself into writing a book. So
when you say you write, I mean, everyone. How many books have you wrote, Luke?
This is number two. This is
This
number
is
two.
number
Yeah.
two. So
Yeah.
when did you decide to write this one then? Was this, back in March when the pandemic really kicked in? Did you say, right, okay, I'm kind of like, there's not much work or it's quietened off. What could I do with myself? Did you set yourself a target? Right, I'm gonna get all this knowledge out? Because you've been working remote teams for a long time before this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It actually was a bit later. What happened was in March. In March, I was working from Mexico, and then I couldn't get back home from Mexico because there was lockdowns and everything across the borders. And then by the time I got back, it was quarantine, and before the dust settled, it's like July came up, and yeah. But at that point, I was like, all right, I actually think there's like a missing conversation here about how do you do things together, and that's kind of where I felt I could just be of the most value for people. So
it's really interesting. So say a missing conversation because where do I go with this one? I don't want to get really hung up on COVID, but because of it, we have gone remote quite a lot. So you're pretty in vogue right now. So all that groundwork you did, all that experience, awesome, because you're ahead of the curve. Look, right. We've really embraced. I mean, look what we're doing right now. This would have been audio only maybe last year, but we've embraced the social side, the going live side quite a lot. And also my training and delivering and lecturing and everything I do, that's gone online as well, which is good because that means I'm not traveling around as much, But what I've also saw is there's companies or educational establishments behind the curve a little bit. And what I mean by that is, so my daughter, Jess, she's 12. We're trying to get Google Classroom working for her right now. And I think the teachers are kind of learning on the hop. I feel like they're a little bit behind on this. So what should have happened maybe, or what could have happened differently to make sure, because this infrastructure is all in place right now.
To be honest, it's been in place for a long time. It's very much kind of the human side of innovation here from a change perspective. It's just like this massive change that suddenly everyone has to do, whether they like it or not. And yeah, I mean, I think with schools, like that's actually probably one of the more difficult parts, because it's kids. They're basically being forced to work like adults, where they get targets and they need to practically listen to like webinars.
Yeah, exactly.
and then at
then
the
parents
end,
are obviously pulling the hair out because parents have to sort the tech out, and they might not be tech savvy, and the passwords, and the kids are
Yeah, exactly. So it's yeah, and then I think it just really depended on the school, and like from a big picture perspective, like what happens with the schools, like that obviously affects what the parents can do and how much they can do. I felt that for a good few months too with a 6-year-old. I mean, and it's you just get to a point where you let the kids do what they need to do, and you end up dealing with it somehow, basically. But yeah, I mean, from a like a productivity perspective, like it's very much about this group dynamic. I mean, it's the same thing in the classroom, honestly. I mean, it's I kind of when I was most recently running this team, I realized at a certain point that actually a lot of my role as the manager was more almost like a teacher, actually, where it was my job to set the environment, get people to feel safe to experiment, to do things, and to have a clear sense of what the goals are. Yeah, and then with them figure out what makes sense in terms of tracking progress in a way that's meaningful for them, which with a lot of knowledge work I think isn't always obvious. Like, in the same way that, like the quality of a book doesn't depend on the number of pages in it, right? Like
yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of these like nuanced type of things where, yeah, it's just they needed to take into account. I mean, I think a big one with companies is like there's a lot of work that's done which isn't really relevant for clients, right? So you might be busy, but you're not being productive, or you're doing things which, in terms of productivity of individual people on a team, like it could be doing work that just isn't particularly valuable, right? So you need to figure out who the best person is to pick up a certain task, and you don't want like your your super high-end experienced person to be doing stuff that, you could have some recent grad do, or, hire out on Fiverr or something, right? So, getting that right balance, I think, is quite a big part of it, really.
So your book, Luke, your book, it's all about what, like remote, about how to work remotely? Is it tips? Is it?
I do have some tips. I mean, I think a lot of it is about just the rethinking of certain things when you're organizing work for a group of people.
Okay.
And I mean, the benefit of it is that it is kind of going back to first principles that, regardless of whether it applies very much to both remote and in-person work. So when we do get back to whatever we get back to, whether it's hybrid or remote only, or we're back in the office, like I think a lot of what I was writing about there, I think is still very much relevant about, exactly how do you delegate tasks in a team, like that kind of thing. But yeah, so almost about like leadership, right? So it's just, there's certain things that were just easy to do because everybody was physically in one place, but that shortcut was suddenly just swept away from us, right? So we kind of need to really be clear on exactly what, the intended outcomes are for the team, and breaking it down.
When you're in person and you've got a physical team in front of you and you can read body language and you can communicate easily, you can kind of nip little things in the bud and stuff like that. But when remotely, even on an email, sometimes context can be taken, out. How do you keep that positivity and camaraderie when it's remote, and effectively stop potentially, annoying a member of your team?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of parts to this. I mean, I think the key thing is, from a team perspective, making sure that everybody has some kind of really small bits that they're doing and that you see that coming in. So I think a common trap is, you set some kind of a goal that's out a few weeks or something, and then, basically the person goes away, they operate in a vacuum, and then after that, it's just like, well, now what? Whereas it's much better if you have this kind of cadence of every day they're doing something that you can see. Like in the case of tech, you can see people, for example, checking in code or that kind of thing. And then, I mean, I've done this with working with editors, with all kinds of knowledge work. I think there's different ways you can break it down where it's like a small task, and then you build up that confidence with each other, so that first of all, you see that the person understands what they need to do and they're actually doing it from a purely a confidence perspective. And then the other side is the camaraderie. And I think there, a lot of that really comes into play once you give people autonomy. So I think and this is the difficult part, really, as a manager, in a way that, if you give people autonomy and you trust them, and you let them come to you and help them define their own goals in the context of the team, where you're just coordinating, let's say, the goals of 30 different people to make sure it all comes together, that I think helps a lot, actually. And on top of that, yeah, you can do like the drinks night in front of Zoom, or that kind of thing. The usual thing that you would do in the office that can work.
So are you talking about just to touch upon that? It sounds like targets and KPIs or goals could be set, and then literally you've got that autonomy where you either get it done or you don't. And if you don't, at least there's some accountability there, because you're not there physically to kind of look over their shoulder and make sure they're doing, or check on them. So it's about putting accountability in there that can actually be measured against. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, although I think the key thing is that it's accountability to goals they themselves say they have and how it fits into the team. So it's not like I'm holding you accountable to a unrealistic goal that I set because I want to beat you over the head. It's accountability, like, well, okay, so we need to get this particular thing done within the next 2 months, and tell me how you're going to do that. Break it down. How are you going to work with other people, and then how will I know that you're doing stuff, and just having a conversation with each person and then figuring it out. So,
do you think productivity drops though, Luke?
How do you define productivity? That's a slippery question.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think innovation it halts when you're working remotely. This is just the way I work, because I'll stand up and just blurt something out and then have a conversation around it. Whereas when I'm alone or working remote, I've only got me and my four walls. And so I think, yes, I can get stuff done, and I might get stuff done in a productive way, but I'm not stretching myself into innovating. Or do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
My other hat is an innovation guy, so it is very much, in the context of new products where I've seen this done. So I think a really big part of it is, like, I'm a huge whiteboard fan, both in person and online.
I'm smiling away here because we talk about whiteboards every single day. How much? Yeah. What did I do before whiteboard? I do not know.
Yeah, exactly. So I think having whiteboards, especially online ones, I think that's the key, in a way, tool, but it's also like a mindset. So it's visual. You have really in-depth discussions. You can map things out in a lot of detail, how things are, how you want things to be. And then you can get into a lot of detail, which, at some point, if you really get into a conversation, like, you don't you lose sight of everything where you are physically. Like, it's about having a good conversation with the team, and I think it's more about getting these different viewpoints out and stress testing whether or not a particular approach is going to work, and brainstorming, and like it comes down to basically like facilitation almost, but it very much can be done. And I think it's just as true when you're working with external people. Like, it doesn't need to be just people within your company. I mean, even though I think I focus more in the book on that, I think whether we're talking about a bunch of freelancers with you, or it's people within your team, like, I think it's very much the case. I think the other thing with online whiteboards that's really cool that you don't have with in-person ones is that these are digital copies, so people can, in between meetings, go and expand and add more stickies and move them around and reorganize them, and you keep iterating and digging, and even in between the meetings. So there's ways of structuring interactions that you don't really have in person. So yes, there absolutely is a number of things which you lose if you go online. But there are certain things which are better. Come
on, what are those?
well, like, I think being able to really work in line with everyone's, let's say, natural schedule, in terms of when you feel productive. You can organize meetings. I mean, I certainly had an availability issue with people, all the way from Sri Lanka down to Colombia. So we only had about 2 or 3 hours a day where we could actually all meet anyway. And then there would be, lots of smaller meetings throughout the day. But yeah, like, you can set up and design how you work in a way that fits with that more. So, like, for example, you don't want to have any meetings over an hour, and then you can kind of break things up and spread it out over time. So there's a whole bunch of approaches you can use in terms of making it feel more natural for people, and also fitting it into the rest of their lives, basically. And I think more so than when you're in person, where it's just like, you show up at 9, you got to stay till at least 5, and even if you're sitting there hungover until noon, like, you've got to be there, right? And here, as long as you are working and delivering on the business outcomes that the business cares about, like, at the end of the day, nobody really, it's up to you what you do, and that's the empowering bit, I think.
You mean by, in terms of what hours you work? So you might not be productive 9 to 5, or you might be sitting hungover. So you're going to start at noon, but you're going to work through till 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. Is that what you mean? Look, it just you choose when to work, not being
exactly. Among other things, I mean, some of the best team members that I had, they'd be up till 4 a.m. and then they'd get up a bit late, but they were available during those few hours where people were all available across the time zones, and it's just, it worked for them. Like, it's yeah, I guess I haven't met Ian in person yet.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bryn. Has he met you in person, hungover? Thinking about the whiteboard bit, I've been using Jamboard, from Google, and I love it. The sticky notes and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. What kind of stuff have you been using?
So I think the two main ones that I've used are Miro and Mural. I think they're both really good. I know there's a lot of entrance and a lot of innovation in this space, and in general with tools. But yeah, I think the visual part of it is good because you can have this kind of thoughtful discussion like you have on a call or an in-person meeting, but you've got the visual side going on at the same time. So even people that aren't speaking can be like writing things, moving things
Right.
around.
Okay. I like that.
So that's one part of it. So you've got like a multimedia aspect. The other thing is with these whiteboard based meetings is getting a situation where you try to get everybody contributing in parallel. So I think a big issue, you see this again, going back to webinars, right? You've got this one-to-many blast of somebody just talking. When it was new, I guess it was exciting, but at a certain point, it's like, it ends up being something you put on the background if you even clock in at all, that kind of thing. Whereas if you, within meetings, like I think a lot of people, the way they subjectively feel a meeting is productive is when they got to say things and then that was taken into account.
Yeah.
So like if you think numerically about it, like what percent of the meeting was each person actually saying something? And if you've got, let's say, 2 people talking for 70% of the meeting, then that kind of means that, the dynamic there needs some work. And I think whiteboards are a great way to kind of slowly nudge people into the direction of everybody contributing and really getting everybody to pull in. And it could be, again, it goes back to facilitation, like how do you create that safe space where people feel comfortable saying things, and then also and then after you've got too much stuff, how do you organize it afterwards to figure out what do you take action on, what's most important, that kind of thing. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to, really.
So our Alfie Joe, he raises a good point there. What he's saying is there that Zoom's reduced all meetings that used to last over an hour to now take 10 minutes. And that makes us more productive. And I've noticed that even from a client point of view, we might want to go and see a client for an hour and a half, and it might take us 45 minutes to get there and back. So we're really slimming down and we're becoming much more productive, and we can do a lot more from here. I think clients have accepted that now because of this, whereas before it might have been, are you too lazy to come and see me, or am I not important enough to come and see you and see me? But now it's accepted, which is great because we can get a ton more done, and we're not in the car for an hour and a half. So do you think that's being more widely accepted now?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I was notorious for, scheduling an hour meeting and finishing it in 10 minutes. And it was something that was really odd a couple of years ago, but it's just, I got to the point where, okay, well, we discussed what we needed to, so, let's go on and do something else. I think the other side of this is like, there's time management, but there's also, again, energy management. So,
okay.
Only measuring time spent on things is kind of it's one layer, but also like how do you can spend 10 minutes but actually feel completely wiped right afterwards. So so there are multiple things going on here, and it's just about being open, about getting the team to be open about where they are, and then making sure that you create an environment where it works for everyone on your team.
It's interesting what Alfie says about the 10 minutes thing, because I used to go mad with my team. They booked me out for half an hour. And I used to say, well, why can we not do this for 20 minutes? Why is 40 minutes not a time duration? It's always like the hour. And then because you booked the hour, would stretch it the hour, and people would be looking, going, all right, okay, we've got 10 more minutes left. What we're going to do is talk about this now. I'm like, we've done that. Let's get out.
Yeah.
So you touched upon a really good point about energy management there, Luke. I've been doing lots of online training, coaching, delivering stuff, and half a day for me is it's enough. Yesterday I did 8:30 till 3:30, and it was a lot. It was a lot. And what I noticed was there was 7 people in the room, and by the end of it, literally the last 2 hours, nothing was going in, or I had to work much harder to get my point across or to help them through that particular task or exercise. So energy management is tough. So if you got any is there any blanket? I know you said like an hour. If you got any tips on that? Any thoughts on how long?
It kind of depends on the meetings, on exactly what you're doing. Like I think there are a whole bunch of rules of thumb that I've come across that I've included in the book that, like in general, for example, with presentations, anything beyond 10 minutes, you typically lose your audience in an
Mate,
online
we've been
format.
going 28 now, and
Yeah. Well, there you go. Right. So, I mean, it is a little, to be fair, it is a little bit different because it's a conversation, but if it's just one
Yeah,
person
okay.
talking, like it is difficult. So that's kind of one really obvious one in terms of your own, but also more importantly, the audience's attention and energy. I mean, I think other than that, in terms of energy, it's just being, I mean, it's more of an awareness thing, like, keeping track, thinking of paying attention to when you do have a lot of energy, when you don't, and then figuring out why, and then, talking with others about that too.
Do you do pattern interrupts? Do you try to like shake things up? Like, do you randomly put Garfield on the screen and then just get people to think what's going on there, and or just to break things up? Do you put icebreakers in and bits of fun and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, from a presentation perspective, that kind of stuff works, and music and that kind of thing. But I think to really get things done, it's more about this collaborative interaction and getting everyone's voice kind of heard, and everyone's stickies on the board, and making sure that after you do that it all kind of is internally consistent, and that tends to keep energy up for quite long stretches. I think usually, an hour and a half sometimes you can do, and then beyond that, it's better just to reschedule for a different time when people are refreshed and they come back and they have they had a night's sleep, they had a shower in the morning with some, great ideas from the shower, that kind of thing, and then it come back with a lot more creativity and a fresh look, and you can keep going. So yeah, it's just one of those things where I think the trap that is easy to fall into is that it's only about time, and it's not. Like, you can have, especially in software, right? Like, you can have some idea that suddenly saves you 3 months of work, right?
Yeah.
So because you have some other way of doing it, or that kind of thing. So it's very jumpy in terms of how much it can affect things. But it's more just a question of paying attention, I think.
Yeah, and just in terms of attention there, so you just mentioned there, if people feel like they've contributed and they're included, they'll pay more attention. So it's about, giving people a voice and including them.
Yeah, and it's also in your interest, right? Because you want to achieve what you want, and they want to help you do it. So it's like it works both ways very much.
Yeah. Andrew's got a question here. So he's talking about in terms of keeping productive. I don't know, Andrew's all over productivity. He's got every hour scheduled. Do you think that helps staying productive?
I mean, I think it's a very individual thing. I've tried all kinds of things myself. So yeah, I think what for me, I think has done quite a lot is trying to create these larger blocks of time to do individual work, and scheduling, like actually scheduling what's important to make sure that it happens. I think that is really good. But the productivity also, again, it depends on if so there's this really classic essay by a guy named Paul Graham in the startup space, where he talks about maker schedule versus manager schedule. And the maker, the creative person, like, they want big blocks of time just to go and write or do something, whereas the manager, like, they typically feel more productive when they interact with others and they're on top of things. So they're usually in meetings. And I think you see this most clearly when you've got somebody who's moving from maker to manager, and then suddenly they've got all these like doubts about whether they're still able to create and that kind of thing. So it just, again, it goes back to, so what does productivity mean for you, right? Like, so it may be that having each hour scheduled to be able to allocate that maker time is really good for you, or you want to have hour by hour breakdowns with specific people, or maybe you feel most productive when you've just got clear out a week on your calendar and go and, I don't know, create something. So
in terms of being productive, I was training yesterday on an innovation culture, and I think an environment is very important for that, because just like, what Andrew just said there on screen, that people work differently, everyone works differently. People like to have different environments as well, and you touched upon their makers and stuff. I've worked in software for a decade, and what I saw was the techie guys. I must be generalized here, sorry everyone. Sometimes they want to be quite insular and hidden and behind a desk, and whereas the commercial guys like I were bouncing around, we're on the phones, we're loud, and we like to wander around and have kind of open spaces to innovate and talk. When you're working remotely, sometimes you've just got your four walls, just like you and I are in right now. Have you got anything in the book in terms of your environment to help with this? Keep yourself motivated and things?
Yeah, so I think a not obvious element of the environment in a remote context is actually the techie stuff. So it's exactly what tools you use and that kind of thing. So for example, the difference between Google Docs versus Excel, right? So if you've got Google Sheets, you can get everyone on the team to contribute something, you quickly get something done, you're moving ahead. Whereas at least a couple of years ago, I'm not fully up to exactly where they are now, but this ability to collaborate and edit at the same time, I think is super important in terms of an environment for work and getting things done. And then, yeah, like the actual, like exactly which tools you use and what features they have, unfortunately, are a part of it, and they do contribute to how much people can contribute. So thinking through that is really important. Beyond that, yeah, I mean, there's stuff like standing desks or ergonomic things so people feel good. Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of lists and advice out online which go into that.
How do you? I'm gonna. You pulled a grenade there because you said Google Docs or Excel, and what about Zoom and Teams and stuff like that? Because we've been thrust into some of these platforms, and some of them have their own little nuances. And sometimes I pull my hair out with them, into breakout rooms, and the chats aren't working and stuff. What's your thoughts on that?
So again, I think the most important filter that I have for this stuff is whether or not people can collaborate. And by that, I mean, can each person follow what they're interested in and contribute and also edit what's going on? And I think that's the thing that it's worth really looking for. So actually, I'm not that big of a fan of Zoom for that reason, because it is very much one way. And I think that's just how people are used to doing things. Like everything is based on a screen share. Whereas if you've got these online whiteboards, for example, everybody can contribute at the same time, and you can do things, and you can have a conversation and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, Teams versus Slack. I mean, I think at least in a larger company context, I think it was more about what people are already using and they feel comfortable on. So I think there's that part of it too, because there's no point in trying to force the using of one or the other if everyone is kind of somewhere else completely, because there is this online community aspect to a lot of these things too, which if it's just tech without the people, then it has no value. So
in terms of people, then, look, I mentioned at the top of the conversation, you managed, I think it was 30 people across all these different time zones, and green screens are not green screens. What's your thoughts on that? They were very in vogue quite quickly, weren't they? Then they went out of vogue.
Yeah. I could never get mine to work very well, but so I was like, not for me. I mean, I've got my Post-its behind me.
So obviously, when you're managing all these teams, though, I mean, it's dead funny, isn't it? Because this last year or so, we've been in each other's bedrooms and lounges. It's very, very personal. I love that kind of raw authenticity piece. Now that we've dropped the armor, and I've said this a few times on the show. We've had partners coming in with cups of tea. We've had kids bursting in through doors and stuff, and I love it. It really adds stuff. Have you had much experience of that, where things just go off like that when you're working remotely?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. I mean, if you remember the Korea correspondent on the BBC, there was this viral video a few years ago where the kids run in, and he's super like stressed out.
His nanny tries to drag him away.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's just like, well, okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, very much so. My daughter likes coming in here, and when she was home from preschool, then she'd be in and kind of wandering around and doing stuff and coloring and whatever. And it's just that's part of the context, really. So.
Yeah. When we're talking about remotely as well, I think sometimes I'm a real victim of this, where I'll just literally work all day and not get out. I won't walk and get fresh air and stuff like that. when you're managing teams, do you have to build some of that in and really tell them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this again, going back to the physical side, the energy side, paying attention, like literally paying attention to what you eat when you exercise, like that does affect, how much attention you can have when you're looking at a screen and somebody's talking. And more often than not, I'd actually be telling people to, go take a break.
Yeah.
Or take a day off or something, because it's just I can hear in their voices, or I can just see that there's a lot extra going on, and in fact they need that time to really be productive, measuring by actually achieving things as opposed to just being around, right? So
it's interesting when you're managing teams though, because in the physical space, you walk in the door, and if your head's down and you're not feeling too good, then the team around you will really absorb that, and the atmosphere drops. And so when you're working remotely, then when you click that camera on and you're having that meeting, are you all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and firing everybody up?
I mean, there definitely is an element of I think it's called emotional contagion.
Okay. Yeah.
From a leadership perspective, and I think that's regardless of whether you're in person or remote. At the same time, not everyone is like Tony Robbins style, and especially in the tech world, not everybody likes having that kind of a manager too. So there's that side of it. Yeah, I mean it's I think a lot of it is what I've found that's been helpful is just focusing on making sure everyone feels safe to contribute, say what they want to say. And I think the potential challenge when you've got especially a mix of introverts and extroverts is you've got extroverts taking over and then drowning out everybody else. And that's kind of something that when you're remote, you can kind of try and open it up so that the introverts do feel they have the space to also contribute. And I think that's a really important part of getting this right.
We've had a bit of a curveball here come in there. A question from Andrew. What do you think about 3-day weekend for employees?
I think it really depends on how well you've defined your goals as a company. And if they can do that and still achieve your goals the way that you want, then why not, right? Personally, in fact, I was just the other day, I was having a conversation with someone that they were saying that actually better than a 3-day weekend, Wednesday would be a good day to have off, right? So you have 2 days and then Wednesday to kind of do stuff, and then Thursday, Friday, you go back to full on contributing. And then, again, it goes back to, especially in innovation, where, the creative juice is based on, to some extent, how well rested you are and that kind of thing. I mean, I think if you go back to even things like, high-end sports stars, like the people who win the tournaments and that kind of thing, they're the ones who've optimized even rest, like when they rest and exactly how and that kind of thing. So to really get top performance at certain, like overall on a sustained basis or on certain times, like when you rest is actually super important. It's just, honestly, I don't have pat answers for every scenario. I think the key thing is that I want people to pay more attention to it and to how it works for their particular team, and that it's just to point out it's not an obvious thing, and also applying what we did in person isn't necessarily the right thing for remote. So
let's talk about the book then before we wrap things up. So how long did it take you to write the book?
About 6 months. So I started in earnest around July, and kind of wrapped up roughly in December. So,
in terms of writing that book, what was your day like? Did you write every day, or?
There's just a lot of parts to it. There was a period where I was doing roughly drafting about a chapter a week, good amount of editing. At a certain point, I started also trying to figure out how to cartoon to illustrate certain things. So that extended it a little bit, but I think I'm happy with it. So it probably could have been shorter if I just went and did the kind of quick Kindle ebook kind of thing. But yeah, I think I've said what I wanted to say, I think. So,
but it is an ebook as well as a hard copy, yeah?
Yeah, it's also print, yeah.
Yeah. How is the print on Amazon then?
Yeah. It's all on there, yeah. So
yeah, fantastic stuff. Are you going to do an audio book?
I'm thinking of it. Yeah, I think there's definitely space for that. And then also I've got a podcast where I'm interviewing people that I've whose work I found helpful when I was managing, or whose research I came across that I found was quite interesting during this year.
Do you want to drop that in? You can just give yourself a little bit of a promotion there. Look, why not?
Yeah, sure. alignremotely.com. So
nicely done.
And so that got all the details there. Yeah, and the book's on Amazon. So that's probably the best place.
Good stuff. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to say?
I think we covered a lot of ground.
That question always gets people.
Yeah, I think we covered quite a bit of ground. I think one last thing is around meetings. We didn't really cover. We didn't get a chapter.
Oh man, I tell you. These people.
I think the other thing that we didn't really cover too much, but around meetings, I think meetings are very much the most obvious way in which corporate culture works, and I think it took me quite a while to get my head around what company culture is, and I think meetings in terms of how they're structured, what you do there at each one, that's kind of where you can have the biggest leverage point for changing how stuff works. I think more so than defining processes and that kind of stuff. Although that can be helpful. It's been helpful for me even as I'm doing stuff on my own. But I think the quality of meetings I think is strongly tied to how well people collaborate, and there's quite a good amount there too.
Yeah.
So.
Good stuff. Right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We've had quite a few questions pop in. That's great. If anyone has a burning one, quickly get it in. I think we're about 30 seconds behind actually when we're live. So we'll probably get no questions then close and they'll come in. So we are live across Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. If you want to jump in, look, the Facebook page is there, Industry Angel, you'll find it. If anyone wants to ask, look, anything, what was the website again?
alignremotely.com.
And are you across any social channels as well? Look, are you prevalent on Twitter or anything? Or
LinkedIn and Twitter are the two main places. Yeah.
Fantastic stuff. So I think if anyone has any questions, they can fire you off there, they connect with you on LinkedIn and buy the book, hopefully.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the last question that came in is from Bryn. Are you training to be a lumberjack? Thanks very much. Bryn, it's Friday. I'm dressing down, come on. Hey, thanks. So, look, thank you so much for your time this morning, and it's been great. I'm going to kick you out, and I'm going to say goodbye to the audience. So, look, hopefully we'll see you in person, maybe instead of remotely one day.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, excellent. Cheers, Luke. You take care now. Best luck with the book. There you go. That was our Luke. Thanks so much for watching this morning on this Friday. As I mentioned at the top of the recording, it's Microbiz Matters Day, so you can jump on microbizmatters.co.uk and see further interviews. There's some great content out there celebrating micro businesses, and I think we need to do that right now, especially during this last year, the pandemic. I've banged this drum quite a lot on the excluded UK, some of the businesses that have fell through the cracks of the support from the government this last year. Lots of businesses are really struggling right now. Lots of individuals are struggling right now. I could waffle them for a long time on this. PTs, hairdressers, beauticians, chauffeurs, taxi drivers. Everybody, is struggling right now. So take a look at Excluded UK, take a look at Forgotten Limited, take a look at Microbiz Matters, and let's try and pull together and support, if we can, some of the people who are really struggling right now in business, because this is where innovation happens within the SME space. These are the people that take risks. These are the entrepreneurs in business, and they should be celebrated and supported and not forgotten. Okay, so we'll try and plan some lives a bit better because we threw this one at you. But thanks so much for watching. And if you're watching on catch up, thank you so much. If you found this useful, please share it with your audience and click that little like button as well. That's always good. We love vanity metrics here. So get it shared. And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, you'll get a notification of when we're going to go live. And make sure you check out Luke's book, because I'm sure it's really relevant for us all now in this remote way of working. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Ian Farrow. This is the Industry Angel. Thanks for listening.